everybody. In this video, I'm going to be doing an update on my Gillio Appunto Trifold in the A6 size, which is this A6 leather folio right here. And I'm going to be showing you how I'm using it as a ring binder and using it to house my ink journal. I affectionately call this my Ringppunto because it's a combination of a ring binder and an appunto. And that was not the way that the appunto was designed to be used, but it is possible to be used as a ring binder. I will try to split this video into two main topics. The first part, I will go into the contents of the ink journal. And the second part of the video, I'm going to explain my thoughts on using this appunto as a ring binder and the pros and cons of doing so, because I will go into the ink journal portion first. To start off with, I have to say that I am quite a beginner when it comes to fountain pens and fountain pen inks. I've been using fountain pens for a long time, since the beginning of high school. But I usually stuck to 2 or 3 pens and I only use black or blue ink. So it's not until recently where I got more into the different fountain pen ink colors, and I'm really more interested in the inks more than the pens. You might be able to tell. So don't consider me a fountain pen expert or pro or any such thing. I really am a very beginner level. For that, I'd like to give some credit to other people who are on YouTube and have ink journals of their own, which they have shared. And especially I was looking at the videos of Gadget Stop 321 because she also has an ink journal and a ring binder. But there are a lot of other people who have ink journals which I have taken inspiration from. So let's get into this ink journal finally. First of all, I have this clear plastic kind of fly leaf here. It's translucent really. And it's made out of a cutting board mat, a plastic cutting board mat that I got from Dollar Tree. And I should credit YouTubers who have used this for various crafts. I think Snap Craftastic is where I found out about this. And this acts as a writing board, because if you look at this leather cover here, and I will take off this decoration, there are leather pockets here which act as card slots. But when you try to write on it, it's kind of bumpy. So I use this as a writing board. If I flip it over here and I write on this side, let's say I take this piece of paper and write on this side, then it will make it a more even writing surface instead of having to write over these pockets. So I think this is very useful. And then when I flip it over, then I get this cover page, which I've made myself. Now all of the ink splotches here and all of the ink splotches that you'll see throughout this setup is made by an artist called Milano83, and I found him online. And I'm allowed to use those ink splotches as long as I attribute it to him. So this is my credit to him. At the bottom of this cover page, I have a little quote. It says, "I write because I don't know what I think until I read what I say." It's by Flannery O'Connor, and she is an author. Now, I'm not a writer or an author, but I do really like this quote just because I write a lot of the times because I want to figure out something and what I think about something. And before we go into the ink journal, I'm going to mention that there are 5 different sections. You will see that they're separated out by these tabs. I have 4 tabs here and then a hidden tab at the back. And I thought I was going to only need 4 tabs, 1, 2, 3, 4, but I figured the 5 sections are actually better, and that's why this one is at the back there. Now I made these tabs out of scrapbook paper, and I went to my local library that has a Cricut machine, and I was able to use the machine to make these dividers. But the first 2 tabs here are the ones that I use the most, or I think I will refer to the most. I'm going to skip those 2 for now, and I'm going to go to the 3rd section and then go backwards. My third section is my ink inventory, and that is my ink inventory. So we have another Milano 83 ink splotch, and this was printed out on a piece of vellum so that you could see the ink splotch and also the scrapbook paper at the back. So now here's my ink inventory, and for each ink that I own or have tried, I'm going to have one separate A6 insert for it. And this is using Tomoe River paper in the 52 GSM weight. And because it's a ring binder, I can take out or add in any of these ink entries as I want and reorganize them how I want. But I have decided on organizing them by color. On the left side of this divider here, I have printed out how I'm going to be categorizing all of these entries. And I'm going by the colors of the rainbow, which is red, orange, yellow, green, blue. Then instead of indigo and violet, I'm going with purple, pink, black, brown, and other. So I don't have inks in every single one of these categories yet. For example, I don't have any oranges or yellows or browns, but I'm leaving them there for when I do in the future. Then after I organize by color, then I go by brand, and then I go by shade. So let's get into this insert. I made this myself, and at the top we have the basic information about the ink, so the brand and then the shade. And sometimes they will have an ink range, which I will put here. Now on the right here, I have a little box where I kind of color in the ink swatch. And this one, I think I used a watercolor brush to get it down. But sometimes I switch to using a Q-tip or a cotton swab to do it. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to best do a swatch to show off the ink properties. And this is enough for me to at least see what kind of color this is. Then after the ink details, then I go into the details of where I got the ink. And then lastly, I have the pen that I used to write this ink sample swatch and the nib that I use. I tried to keep it simple and to leave as much information into one piece of paper as possible. And so that's where the notes come in. I can kind of customize what I want to write about each ink inside the notes. For example, then this ink is the Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Roses. And then I can go through all my ink swatches here. Although I'm not 100% done, because although I've only been writing in the inks that I have currently inked up within this past month, and I still have some more inks to go. This is my last ink I think I have so far. I just wanted to mention that I can also use the back of each page as well. The paper that I'm using, as I've said before, is the Tomoe River paper in the 52 GSM. This particular paper was blank on one side, and then it had a 5mm grid, dot grid on the other side. So I printed it out on the blank side and then left the dot grid side on the back. So at the back of each page, if I ink up a new pen with that ink, then I can write down the pen and the ink so I can see exactly how each pen performs with that ink. So this is another place, more like a pen test page for every single ink. And I didn't print anything on this side because my printer is pretty finicky, and so is Tomoe River paper, in that it is so thin that it tends to cause paper jams, and I've experienced a lot of paper jams. So I have left it to one page I have left it to printing on one side only. But because they have a dot grid here, it's okay for me to leave this entire back of the page blank. The last note here is just my notes on what kind of things that I'm looking for that I may want to write about each ink. And then I go through all of these, like sheen, the shading, whether it's water resistant or waterproof, whether there's any, what's the dry time, and so on. Those are the things I might consider putting into the note section of each ink. These are all empty. And then that is my ink inventory, which is my third section. And now I'm going to move on to the fourth section, which is my pen inventory. So my pen inventory follows the same format as the ink inventory, where every single page here is for one pen I own. And then on the left here is the divider. I put a quote here because there was nothing else to put here. And this quote just says, "The pen is mightier than the sword if the sword is very short and the pen is very sharp." And that quote is by Terry Pratchett. So moving on into the insert. Again, I kept it very basic, where I write down the company that made the pen, the model of the pen, the color of the body, and the nib. Then I write down where I purchased it and how much I purchased it for. And then I have another section just for notes where I write down the specific things I think about each pen. So I have a lot of blank pages here, and then I'll just show you the last note in this section, which is another pen inventory notes. So I write down what I think I should be writing in the note section of each pen and the things that I'm looking for. This is the fifth section, the little hidden section, and I don't have a little cover page for it. The divider I used is a tester divider because I didn't have any more of this scrapbook paper left when I brought it to the library to have it cut, and I didn't want to waste this paper, so I used a scrap paper instead. And I will eventually go back to the library and use this scrapbook paper to make it match. But this is now my paper section. The paper section is where I have all sorts of different paper. And this, for example, this is the Leuchtturm paper, this is the Moleskine paper, Filofax paper, and Clairefontaine, and so on. And so what I'm going to write in this section is basically a pen test section. It's where if there's a pen or ink combo that I think works really well on this paper or doesn't work on this paper, then I will note it down here. And why? Because maybe there's some bleed through, so I know that when I come back here and look at it, I won't use that pen and ink combo in this paper because it feathers or it bleeds through or there's ghosting. And whether or not I can highlight over that paper and whether it will work. On this note, I have the different types of paper that I'm going to try and put in here. So I've made a list, and the ones that I've checked off I have put in here, and some of them I still have to take out because some of the papers that I have are in bound notebooks that I would have to physically cut or tear off, like the Moleskine paper I cut out of a notebook, and then the Leuchtturm paper I tore it out, which is why it has, a page number here. And also within the pen inventory and the other sections, you'll also have noticed that I use different types of paper. This one is copy paper, like a Seria copy paper. This is a lined piece of paper and it's Apica. This is Rhodia paper. This is Muji dot grid paper. This is Rhodia again. And then I think I also have Clairefontaine paper here. So that's another place for me to do a pen test within the Penventory. Let's go back to the beginning of this binder and then I'll show you the remaining 2 sections left. The first section is the currently inked section. And it is a table of all the pens that I have currently inked up. On the left here I have a little quote. It just says, "Keep calm and carry on." Now whenever I have a pen and I fill it up with ink, then I will record it here. So there are more pens that I have that are currently inked, but I haven't refilled them recently, so they're not on this list. I won't fill it out until I have run out of ink on that pen and then re-ink it, or yeah, re-ink it, that's right. And so that's why there's only a couple of entries here. So I made it into a table format where I have the date that I inked it up, and then the pen that I'm using and the ink that I used to fill it up with. Now on the left here, there's these little dots. I'm sort of following that bullet journal method where a dot means that, where a dot means in this context is it's an active pen. That means I'm currently using it to write. And then when let's say for this first one, the Parker pen, if I use up all the ink in that pen and then I re-ink it, then I will take a pencil and then I will just cross it off like this. So I can quickly look at a glance. All of the rows in this table that don't have a X on it means that it is currently inked up and I'm currently using it. And here I'm also using different types of paper. This is a Muji loose leaf paper. I think it's their plantation paper. And I did write here that on this paper, I inked up this Schaefer pen and it has a little bit of feathering. So it's not really the best pen and ink combo to use here. And again, that means that this currently inked section is also a big pen test page, really. I did print it double-sided so you can see that there's also some bleed through as well on this ink. And then I have different types of paper as well. This one was the Muji paper, like I said, and this one is Fabriano paper. And I have a lot of blank ones for when I need to use them later. The last section here is the use up the ink section. And this is similar to the currently inked section, in which I have a table here. And let me discuss the quote first. It says that, or the quote says, "To improve is to change, so to be perfect is to have change often." And that is attributed to Winston Churchill. So in the use up the ink section, I have a table where I write down the pen and then what it's inked with. The idea for this section came about when I was using a certain pen and ink, and I knew that after I used up all the ink in that pen, I wanted to try a different ink. For whatever reason it was, maybe I just didn't like the combo, or I wanted to do something new. And I sometimes would forget which ink I wanted to put into it. And so I might have just re-inked it with the same ink again and then kept on writing with that ink, which I didn't want to forget. So I would write it here, what ink I wanted to replace it with. So here's the one example. This is the TWSBI Eco in my black TWSBI Eco here. Originally I had put in the J. Herbin Emerald de Chivor, which I got as a sample, but I realized that after I used up all the ink in that sample, I wanted to put in a black ink, and that's the Sailor Kira Guro. And I also wanted to switch out the nib from this TWSBI Eco to an extra fine nib, because I tend to like thinner nibs when I write in black. And so when I ran out of that ink in that pen, then I switched it up to put in the black ink, which is why there's a check mark here. Now the next entry on here is, it says it's a Gillio 51A pen, and it's inked with that same black ink, the Kira Guro by Sailor. And I knew that I didn't want two pens with the same ink. So I know that once I finish using up the ink in this pen, then I'm going to replace it with another ink. And at this moment, I don't know which ink yet, so I left it blank. But once I finish up the ink, then I will check here, and then I will decide what kind of ink I want to put it in there, or maybe not use the pen at all for a bit. And so that's what this dot means. That means I still have to switch up the ink. Here, the use up the ink section again is another pen test page, because I can use different types of paper as long as I can print on them. And here we had the copy paper. This is Fabriano paper here. And I think I have not as many pages in this section, because I think this will take a lot longer for me to get through. And we're back to the inventory again. That's a flip through of my ink journal. I think this is a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to fill it out, and I still have to finish filling it out. I still have to redo this paper divider and this paper divider. And there's just enough space for me to put all the things I want to, and with a little bit more room to expand. And because this is a ring binder, if it gets too full, then I can just take out the pieces of paper that I think are not relevant anymore and just store them somewhere else. And that's why I think that the ring binder is a very good way to use an ink journal, because you can move pages around and you can use as many different types of paper as possible. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.